Hello and welcome to a new episode of the FindFocus show. Today I will talk about a topic that I have been struggling for a long time. It's about shiny object syndrome and how to cure it. Today, this morning, I was doing my hour of power from Tony Robbins, and this is from a program called Personal Power. And this program is about 30 years old, I believe. Like it's really, really old. And when I was thinking about the topic for today, I realized, sometimes the old stuff is better. And then I came up with the headline for this episode. And actually the hour of power is like still my favorite part of my morning ritual, especially the gratitude exercise. And I think Tony still gives this out like to most of his customers. And it's such a powerful audio tape, even though it's already quite old, especially by the standards of the internet. As you might know, I'm also like a big fan of Nassim Nicholas Taleb, who's a philosopher, and he wrote a book, Anti-Fragile. And in this book, he described something he called the Lindy effect. And this basically describes when there were Broadway shows in New York, the longer they run, the more likely they will stick and continue to run. And this is what he called the Lindy effect. And you can see this in all kind of places. Like the longer a restaurant exists, the higher the probability that it will stick around. And for other things, it's the same for books, for example. Like we still read Seneca and all the Roman philosophers. But there's a lot of books right now in this time. There are so many books that are published, but how many of these books will people read in 100 years? Probably not that much. And this is something I want to talk about. And especially if you're running an online business, I think it's twofold. There's timeless truth and fundamentals that will basically never change, and there's trends that you can try to capitalize on. For example, in my past, I was a professional poker player in the late 2000, and I started playing in 2007, which was the beginning of the poker wave. And I stopped playing in 2011 or something, which was at the peak. And afterwards, it's slowly declining. And I think I stopped at the right point. And it's the same if you look at growth hacking tactics, some tactics that might work on Facebook to drive traffic to a website or anything else. Like there's always a certain time span, and then once a marketplace matures, it gets harder and these kind of tricks stop working. And but there's also like timeless principles, for example, just building relationships with influential people that will always work and has worked 50 years ago, and it will work 50 years into the future. So this is something I focus on because I believe like technology is degrading our lives, but the value of personal relationships will stay and continue. And there's in the time that we live in, this will get less and less, and unfortunately people are just sticking to their screens, to their mobile phone, and just looking there and thinking like they connect with people via messaging. But it's actually only when you talk to people in person, ideally, or at least doing a video conference call like on Skype or Zoom or something, that you can actually connect with people. And one thing I learned about business is that you have to think for yourself. And then especially when you study like the old things that used to work like 100 years ago, for example, like in business, like most of the things on copywriting were written like 100 years ago and then just adapted to the new medium. And so the next time you want to buy a new book or a new course or something on personal development, ask yourself, maybe there's something in your library already that covers this, and then reread that book. So because I believe it's so much better, and science proves this as well. You will get much more information and absorb much more information by rereading a really good book than by just reading the next book and the next book and watching another YouTube video. And this is something I try to do. Again, like my favorite book is probably of all time is Seneca's The Shortness of Life. And if you read this book, you'll recognize that these principles, like our society basically works like the Roman society like 2000 years ago, and not that much has changed, especially how people value their time and how you should spend your time. And one side note on this, like Seneca was actually the second richest man in the Roman Empire after the emperor, like at least one of the richest men back there. And this is, I really try to look at this book, for example, and try to think like what can I use for my life and for my business. And I think this is something you should do as well. Ask yourself, like, what's your favorite book on personal development in your library, and just reread it again, and just say no to the next course that somebody might pitch you, or that you stumble on Facebook or YouTube or whatever it is. And just have your goal defined, and then reread the books, reread the old stuff, and then think like, how can this apply to my life or to my business? I think that's at least, if I look at the like really successful people like Russell Brunson, that's what they do anyway. They read like still Gary Halbert, like a copywriter, really famous one, or they really think like, how does this apply to my business? And they look at the history of TV and commercials and ads, and ask themselves like, yeah, how can I transform this to Facebook or Instagram or whatever? Because we humans, we actually do not change. Like, our brains evolved over millions of years, and this does not really change. And so, yeah, I hope you like this episode. I hope you pick up a book that you like to read in the past. If you're looking for recommendations, I highly recommend Seneca. I highly recommend Nassim Nicholas Taleb. And see you tomorrow.